Yeah.
So I have created a small prototype using Splash. Okay. Let's say if we want to create Odata project or Odata service, right? All of
Mm-hmm.
it starts from a application, whether it is a desktop application or mobile application. So it all starts with your user interface. So based on what your user interface needs are, you are going to create your OData service based on your UI. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted to demonstrate is, I would like to create a OData service where I would like to get an entity, where I would like to create an entity, delete an entity, update an entity, and get the collection of entities. So to demonstrate that functionality, I have created, this is created with a Splash. Splash is a prototype tool. It's a cloud environment where you can create prototypes. It's basically for functional people to create prototypes to explain it to development to team how the application should look like and all. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here, I'm displaying a list of banks in the system. The reason I chose this, business, this object is, I just wanted to demonstrate, creation of OData service. I don't want, my motto behind choosing a simple object is, to demonstrate, the functionality in OData. I'm not going to spend much of the time on ABAP since you all know, ABAP pretty well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, whenever user logs in, we are going to show all the banks in the system. Let's say whenever I click on that particular bank, I'm going to display the information of that bank. So basically, the user can see it, can update it, can delete it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if the user, from the bank lookup itself, he can create a bank. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can take any simple object. Without, let's say, if you take a sales order, probably you need to create sales order with sales order item, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
without getting into the complex, down the line we will go into the complex entities and all, but for now, just choose any simple object where you can create that object, delete that object, update that object, or get that object or get collection of those objects. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So so this is, again, this prototype has been done with Splash. Okay. So it is a simple cloud environment. Okay, yeah, can you mute from your side if you have any questions so that you can unmute and ask the questions? Okay, so this is a cloud-based um, environment from SAP where you can create prototypes. Basically, it is for functional people to create prototypes. Okay, let's say if you go here, as I told you, SAP UI5, if you write application once, you can port it to desktop, mobile, tablet. So the same application, if you see, right? So the same application can be accessed it from tablet, from mobile, and from desktop. So that is one advantage with SAP UI5 libraries. So most of the libraries are responsive. So if you build an application with SAP UI5 libraries, you can port it to any device you want. Okay. So that is the splash part of it. So let me just log into ECC system.
So how do you get to that splash system? I mean, that cloud interface. I mean, that cloud application.
Okay.
Is it freely available or
Yeah.
experience splash? And anyone can create a project from it, is it? I mean, do they have their own databases and things like that?
No, it does not have any database, but you can just upload your data through spreadsheets and all.
Oh, I
Uh,
see.
so you can create all the data. Okay. It has
Uh-huh.
all the tools uh, to edit, to create your own data so that you can show real data in the prototype. I mean, it is just make you feel that it is real, but it is just for prototype. I mean, instead of me explaining on a blackboard or something, if I come up with this prototype so that I can share it with anybody, so that they can get a feel of how the application is going to look like and all. Okay.
I see.
Okay. Um, so so when I talked about the gateway components, I mentioned if you are below 7.40, you will have three components. One is gateway core, and the other one is IW underscore FND, that is foundation server. The other one is IW underscore BEP, that is backend enablement provisioning. Okay. If you are on 7.4, you need to have SAP underscore GW gateway foundation server that will have all the gateway functionality. Okay. Since this is SAP 7.4 system, let's see what components it have. Okay. So if you see, this is a 7.4 system, that's why you will see only one component, SAP underscore gateway FND, gateway foundation. Okay. If you log into a system which is whose version is below 7.40, you will see three components. Okay. Based on whether you are in front end or based on whether you are in back end, you will see those components. You all can see it, right? SAP underscore GWFND component.
Yes.
Okay. So before you start development, you should have those components. Then only you will get to a gateway service builder transaction and all. Okay. So basically, let's say in other to do data modeling, right? So what is the information that we see here? I see bank name, I see bank key, I see street name, I see city name, and when I get into the bank, I mean to get the information, I will see what country it belongs to, what is the branch, what is the routing number, who created it, when it is created, all that kind of information. So based on, I mean, what you want to show in the user interface, you will come up with your entity information. Okay. So the best thing is, let's say if you want to create an entity, right? I will explain why later, but create a structure with all the information that you wanted to show in the user interface. Okay. If I go to SE11, So I created a structure with all the information that I wanted to show in the user interface. Basically, it has a bank key, name of the bank, street, city, state, what is the country, what is the bank number, bank branch, routing code, who created it, on what day it has been created. Okay. So let's say if you are going to create a OData service which consists of 10 entities, right? Create 10 structures um, and put all the information you want to see in your entity in that structures. Okay. So I will explain you later why you got to take this approach. You can create without structures too, but my suggestion is to create a structure and from that structure you create the entity. Okay? Any questions? So now I'm going to create the OData project. So this is the transaction. So I go to the gateway service builder. So when we discussed gateway service builder, the development approach is, the development approach in gateway service builder revolves around projects. Okay. If I wanted to create a OData service, I will create a project. Okay. So you see create project here, right? So I will create a project. My project name is, since this is a test system, since lots of people will be using, create a project. Okay. With your initials, probably you will add whatever your initials is going to be, so that you can identify your project very easily. Since this is a test system, probably tons of people might be using it. So I'm going to use learn UI5 prefix with all my projects. Okay. So um, I'm going to call my project z underscore learn UI5, and my application UI5 application is going to be banks. So I have added all that. So just name it sensibly so that anybody who logs in can figure it out what that project is about. Okay. So give the description. Okay. So the project type is, here just choose a service with SAP annotations. Generation strategy is standard. All those are, you don't need to change it. Just give the project name and the description of it. Choose any project. I have created this package for myself so that I can see all the development objects at one place. Okay. So now I create the project. My project name is, so when I create the project, it created 4 different folders under my project. Okay. Let's see one by one. If I go to the data model, okay, um, here you will see entity types, associations, and entity sets. Okay. Under data model, this is where you are going to create your entities, entity sets, and association between the entities and all. Okay. And you have service implementation, you have runtime artifacts, you have service maintenance. Okay. So let's see if I wanted to create this application, right, I need, here I don't need two entities. I am just fine with one entity because all I am doing is I'm going to display list of banks. Whenever user clicks on one particular bank, I'm going to display information belong to that bank. Okay. At the same time, I'm giving flexibility to user to create, to update, to delete, uh, to get, and to get a collection of banks. Okay, so in my case I just need one entity. Okay, so how you know how many entities you need? Because when you look at a UI application, probably you can better understand how to do data modeling and all. If there are two or three different objects in your UI application, you end up creating two or three different types of entity types. Okay, let's say if you are displaying sales orders, and whenever a user clicks on sales order, you will display sales order items, right? So in that case, probably you need two entities, one for sales order and the other for sales order item. So this boils down to, how many number of objects, distinctive objects in your UI application, those many number of entities that you are going to create. Okay, so in this case I'm not going to create multiple entities because I just need only one entity. Okay, from the data model, right click on it. You can create an entity from the DDIC structure. Since I have already created my structure, okay, import DDIC structure. So here you will give, what is the entity name that you want to create with. I want to call my entity as bank. Okay, whenever you are naming entities or the properties under it, right? Let's say if we are working in SAP, probably we will see some German names. In the structures and all, we will see some names which only people who works in SAP understands. But since these OData services are going to be served outside of SAP, just name the properties or just name the entities in a sensible way. Okay, I will give my ABAP structure here. Okay, so you will see all the attributes under that structure here. So basically you will choose, okay, you create the entity from the structure you have already created. Okay, so you will see what is the field name, what is the type of it and all. So okay, so here you can choose either as a property or a key or ignore. So I will choose my bank key as the key of my entity. Okay, and all the other properties I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to ignore any of the properties. Okay, whenever you give the structure, it changes the object name, so put it back to whatever the entity you want to create. I want to create my entity uh, with name bank. Okay, and you check this checkbox as entity type. So basically I am creating an entity type. Okay, so if you see one more thing here, right, I'll show you. You will see the code data types, right? You will see edm.string. Let's say if the above data type is char15, it will, whenever you create the entity, since the entity follows entity data model, it will try to pick up the right data type in the EDM data model. Okay, since we have character, it changes to string with length 15. The bank name is char 60 in ABAP, so it tries to get the corresponding data type in the EDM data model, that is string, and the length is going to be 60. So if you see created date, we will have datum here. So in the EDM data model, we don't have any data type called date. We have date and time. So it tries to pick up the corresponding data type. Most of the times it gets it right. Let's say if there is any problem, you got to adjust. Okay. So let's see. So now I have created my entity. You will see it under the entity type. Okay. And you will see the properties for that entity. Okay. So this is what the users are going to see outside. So that's why I'm going to name it a little bit sensibly. I mean, since it is here, it is bank L, I'm going to say bank key. Okay. And I'm going to say bank A as bank name. Okay. And I'm going to say street. And I'm going to say city. Okay. State. Country. Bank name. Bank name. And this one is branch, so I'm going to say branch. Okay. And this one is routing number. This one is, I mean, if you are working on ABAP structure or ABAP data type, you will see, if you see name, ER name, probably you will know because it is a data element inside SAP. But if you are nothing to do with SAP, probably people don't understand what ER name and ER date will be. That's why uh, you are going to change these names to something sensible, something in English. Created by Ted at created on. Okay. So what I have done is I have created an entity called bank.
Duplicated, right?
What is that?
Second one, bank name.
Okay.
Second field name is bank name, again the bank name.
Okay, it is bank number. Okay. What I have done is I have created an entity bank. Instead of creating it, I mean, I used a structure, I mean, database dictionary structure to create my entity. Okay. So you will see the property here, you will see the above field name, and you will see data type in the entity data model. So if you go here, okay, since this, I'll show you. So I mean, if you see the ABAP fields versus the properties on the entity, let's take the first one, bank L. Okay, it is of length 15 and character type. Here you will have bank key. The EDM data type is string. So the corresponding data type for char in ABAP is string in the entity data model, and the maximum length of it is 15. So you will have other properties here. I will explain it later. Creatable, updatable, sortable, nullable, filterable. So you will see the corresponding data type of the, corresponding above field name, bank L. So if you come to the bank name, the data type in EDM entity data model is string and the length of it is 60. What is the corresponding above field? Bank A. Okay. So basically, it creates an entity based on our structure. Okay. Did you get it up to this point?
Yes.
So everybody okay with it? Okay. So since our UI application needs only one entity, right? I have created one entity. So let's create an entity set now. Okay. From the entity set, okay, right click on it, create. So entity set is nothing but a collection of entities. So let's say whenever you create an entity set, normally it is going to be plural of your entity. Since I created an entity with name bank, I'm going to call my uh, entity set as bank, and the entity type name is bank. Okay, you can choose the from the value help here too. So that's it. So basically your entity set is going to refer your entity. Okay. So let's say even if you make some changes in the entity, it automatically get reflected in the entity set, because entity set always points to your entity. Okay. So whenever you want to add some properties or delete some properties, update some properties, you are going to update at the entity type level. Okay, so that the entity set also get updated, because the entity set always points to the entity type. Okay, so since my SAP UI5 application needs bank information, I have created an entity and I have created an entity set. So the way I name my entity is bank, and the entity set name is banks. It is just going to be plural of your entity. Let's say if your entity is sales order, your entity set name is going to be sales orders, because sales orders entity set contains collection of sales order entities. Okay, so I have created an entity set. Okay, so the Gateway Service Builder is a design time tool where you create entities, entity sets, you create associations between the entities. Okay, this is what you do. Okay, so once you are done with designing your entities, entity sets, associations, navigations, okay, you are going to generate the runtime objects. Okay, we will see what will happen when we generate the runtime objects. Okay, click on this button. Okay, so if you see here, um, there are three sections to it. Okay, so what it will do is it will create a model provider base class, and it will provide a model provider extension class. Okay, so you can change it here. I'm going to get rid of this extra Z. Okay, I will explain what this these classes means to us. Okay. Okay. Here under the model provider class, it will create a base class, and it will create a extension class. So even under the data provider class, it will create a base class and extension class. Okay. So when I generate the runtime objects, these are the objects which are created by the service gateway service builder. Okay. Model provider class, in the model provider class, it will create the base class and it will create the extension class. In the data provider class, it will create the base class and it will create the extension class. So under service registration, it will create the technical model name and technical service name. Okay. Let me copy it so that I can explain what it means. So you can name it. I mean, basically, if it is model provider class, I mean it says MPC. If it is extension class, model provider class extension, it says that MPC underscore extension towards the end. So whatever in front of it, you can change it, but just keep these so that, I mean, even after you develop, somebody else will understand it easily. Okay. Okay. I click on continue. I will assign a package. I have created my own package, so I suggest you also create your own package so that when you go to your package, you will see all the objects at one place. Okay. So I generated the runtime objects. Okay. Under data model, under entity types, I have created an entity type called bank, and under the entity sets, I have created an entity set called banks. Okay. And I generated the runtime objects. So under the runtime objects, you will see what is your technical model name, what is your technical service name, what is the model provider class base, what is the model provider base class, what is the model provider extension class, what is the data provider base class, and what is the data provider extension class. Okay. So let me go to the model provider class first. Okay. So everybody is aware of object-oriented ABAP, I mean classes and objects and all? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So if you go to the model provider class, right, I mean you will see several methods, right? If you, I mean you will have a method called define. If you go to the define, you will have, I mean this is the method, right? The model provider class. You will have a method define, I mean which will have define bank. So basically it has, I mean this means define underscore your entity type. One second, I'll come back. So that's what it does. I mean it will create a method with prefix define underscore. Okay. So if you go to this define underscore bank, right? Basically, if you see the code, I mean, could you be able to see it well, the font and all?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So basically what it does is, I mean, if you see, it will create an entity called bank. Okay. And under that bank, whatever the properties that we have created, I mean, for that entity type, it has created a property called bank key, and the ABAP field name is bank L, and it is key, and the data type is EDM underscore string, and the maximum length of it is 15. It can be nullable. Okay. And the next, if you see bank name and the corresponding ABAP field name, what is the data type, and I mean what is the length of it, can it be nullable? Similarly, you will see all the properties that you have created under the entity. Basically it created the entity, it created all the properties which reflects our design time modeling. Okay. So this entity type is bind to a structure z learn UI5 underscore banks, because we have created our entity based on a structure. Okay. So it gives the structure name, and it created the entity set called banks. Okay. So basically whatever you see here in the entity type, right, the bank and the properties. So basically what it does is it create, I mean, runtime objects for your design time modeling. That's what it does. So it just reflects, I mean, it just reflects whatever your design time modeling is going to be. Okay. In your define bank method, you will see an entity is being created with name bank, and you will see all the properties with the corresponding ABAP fields, and you will see whether which property is a key and what are all the data types of those properties, what is the maximum length, can it be nullable. So it creates all those properties, and I mean the entity, it says that the entity is created from structure. Okay, this is what it does. So then what is the, I mean in the model provider, this is the base class. Let's say if I go to the model provider class extension, all right, if you go to the properties, your super class is, I mean the base class. So for this extension class, the super class is this model provider base class. Okay, sorry, I put it in the wrong place. So basically for the extension class, the super class is going to be your base class. In the methods, if you see here, I mean none of these methods are implemented. Let's say if I click on define, it says that method define is implemented in class model provider class. Okay, so none of the methods are implemented in the model provider class extension. Then what is the use of this extension class? Let's say if you wanted to change the design time environment, let's say you have created this entity, but if you wanted to change the behavior during runtime, this is where you are going to re-implement those methods. I will explain you when we are going to use it when the time comes, but for now just remember these extension classes. If you wanted to change the behavior during runtime, I mean you are going to use these extension classes. Okay, so similarly I'm going to show the data provider class. So we are done with the model provider class and the model provider class extension. So the model provider class is the design time reflection of our data modeling. The model provider class extension is, let's say if you wanted to change that behavior which you created during design time, then you are going to use this model provider class extension. Okay, so let's go to data provider class. Okay, so there will be lot of methods, I mean which we don't care at this point of time. Okay, there are a couple of methods, I mean which created towards the end. Okay, so these are the methods. So the methods are equivalent to your entity set name, your entity set underscore create entity, underscore delete entity, so similarly your entity set name underscore get entity. Your entity set underscore get entity set. your entity set underscore update entity. So normally in the RESTful APIs or OData service, even though entity type is the crucial, but when you are going to request the resource, you are going to request through entity set name. Okay. So when we talked about the uniform interface constraint of the RESTful API, we said that, okay, we are going to use HTTP spec to do CRUD operations on the resources. Okay, what are those CRUD operations? For create, read, update, delete, right? So,
Yes.
um, so for create, okay, for HTTP post, this method will be called. Okay, for HTTP delete, this corresponding method will be called. So since we have created this OData service, right, it need to conform to that uniform interface constraint. So we are going to provide all the methods which will be we are going to provide all the methods which are corresponding to the HTTP spec or HTTP verbs or HTTP methods. Okay, this is HTTP GET. One second, guys. Um, this one is corresponding to HTTP GET. Okay, but this one is to get the collection. This one is HTTP put. So in short, if I wanted to create a bank, this method will be called. Okay, banks underscore create entity. When I want to delete a bank, this method will be called. When I wanted to get an entity, this method will be called banks underscore get entity. If I wanted to get collection of banks, this method will be called. If I wanted to update an entity, update a bank, this method will be called. Okay, this method will be called. The HTTP methods that I use to create is HTTP post. Since we said that whenever you are using RESTful API or OData service, we are going to use HTTP spec to do the CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. So when you, how do you use HTTP methods? If I wanted to create, you will use HTTP post. If you want to delete, you use HTTP delete. If you want to get it, you use HTTP get. If you want to get the collection of banks, you will use HTTP get. If you want to update a bank, you will use HTTP put. Okay, so these are the HTTP methods and the corresponding methods in the data provider class which will be called. Okay, so this is about the data provider class. There are lots of other methods which we are going to discuss in the later part of this course, but for now just concentrate on this method. Since I have one entity and one entity set, my data provider class has that entity set underscore create entity method, that entity set underscore delete entity method, that entity set underscore get entity method, the corresponding entity set underscore get underscore entity set method, corresponding entity set underscore update underscore entity method. So these methods will be called based on the HTTP methods that we use. Okay. I mean, if it is confusing, it is all right, because we are going to see when we test this OData service. But this is about it. I mean, for the OData provider class. Do you guys have any questions?
No, no questions.
Okay. So this is about the data provider class. Let's say data provider class extension. Okay. So even in the data provider class extension, you will have all the methods that we discussed in data provider class. Okay, before we go there, even for the data provider class, right? The even for the data provider class extension, the base class is or super class is still data provider class. Okay. If I go to methods, I mean, if you see, these are not implemented. Okay. When you click on the get entity set, it says that the corresponding method is implemented in the data provider class. Okay. If you go there, it simply says here that, okay, this method is not implemented. Let's say when you come here, it just raises an exception saying that the corresponding method is not implemented. Let's say as part of your application, if you wanted to get banks, you need to implement this method in the data provider class extension. So basically this is what it means. Basically base classes are the reflection of your data, your design time data modeling. If you wanted to make any changes during runtime, you do it in the extension classes. Okay. Let's say if I wanted to get my bank's information from the system, I'm going to re-implement or redefine that method. Okay. So similarly, if I wanted to create a bank, I'm going to redefine this method in the data provider class extension. So these are, basics of OData modeling or OData service development. So, you got to know uh, what the gateway service builder does and what the runtime objects does. Okay. So we discussed the model provider class extension, data provider class extension. We will see the technical model name and the technical service name. Okay. This technical service name is very crucial because this is what the users are going to see outside of SAP. Okay. So we will see it in a little bit later part of this today. So this service is very important. Okay. Uh, this is what people outside of SAP sees. Okay. So what we have done is we have created a OData project so far. Off of that OData project, we have created an entity and we have created an entity set. We have generated the runtime objects. As part of the runtime objects, we created model provider class, model data provider class. We created the technical model name. We created the technical service name. Okay, and their versions. So all this is going to be done your business backend systems. In a central hub deployment, right? Gateway service builder, gateway service builder stuff. you are going to do in the business backend system. Registering the service and maintaining register and maintain service register and maintain the service in your gateway hub system. Okay, in the embedded deployment, both happens in the same system. Okay, since we are following the embedded deployment because we only have one system where our data is going to be, okay, and that's where we create our OData services and OData projects. That's where we are going to register and test and maintain those services. Okay. So far I have created my OData project. Okay. I have created an entity and entity set. I have generated the runtime objects. That is the gateway service builder part. Let's say if I wanted to register my service, okay, I go to this transaction. Activate and maintain services. Okay. So in the activate and maintain service, you will see add service. Okay. In the add service, I mean, let's say since we are doing everything in the same system, we don't need system alias of the business backend system because we are maintaining the services or we are registering and testing the services also in the same backend system where we created. But let's assume that you have different, I mean, gateway hub system versus backend system, right? You will give the system alias of the your backend business system since here everything is same. Okay. And you will give the technical service name in order to find your service, right? Okay, technical service name. So I mean, remember this, I mean, I have given a system alias called ERP. Okay, so I can find my service. I mean, this is my service name, right? This is the service name I created when I generate the runtime objects, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click on it so that it will register the service in the system. Okay, here you will see technical service name, um, external service name, what is your model name, and I mean what is the package and all. Okay, so this is what called registering or adding a service. So basically what happens when you register a service is, I mean, it will create a SICF node. Okay. if you go to SICF, it will create a SICF node under default host, SAP, Odata, OPU, Odata, SAP, and your service name. So this is the SICF node which will be exposed to outside where users are going to use it. Okay, so whenever you create a service, it will create a SICF node, okay, with your service name. Okay. Um, so all the internet applications, whenever you create a WebDyn Pro, it is going to create a SICF node here. Okay. Similarly, whenever you create a OData service, it will create a SICF node here. Okay. So this is what users are going to see. Do you understand? Are any questions? Okay. Okay. And one more thing is when I registered the service, okay, when I registered the service, I use the system alias. Okay. So this is my system alias, right? Let's see where it is created. If you go to SPRO, if you go to SAP reference IMG, you will see SAP NetWeaver, you will see gateway, okay, you will go, if you go to the configuration and if you go to the connection settings, if you go to SAP NetWeaver gateway to SAP system, you will see manage SAP system aliases here. So basically the system alias is associated with a trusted RFC, right? I mean, it does not make any sense when you are following the embedded deployment option, but let's say when you are working in central hub deployment option, right? From in hub system, a system alias is created and this alias points to a trusted RFC, and this trusted RFC is this RFC connection is from hub to backend. Okay.
So now this system alias ERP that you gave, was it already created, or did you when you mentioned ERP it got created?
No, it is already created.
It is already created, right? Okay.
Yeah. But it got, I mean, it got no meaning because it is a dummy system alias to the same system.
Right.
Since it is, we are following in the embedded deployment option, right? So a system alias is created.
So even when we are using the central hub deployment strategy, I mean all the trusted RFCs need to be listed in that in that list that you showed here, right?
Yeah, I mean, you will see system aliases, and the system aliases is pointed to an RFC destination.
Right. I mean, those need to be created already
Yes,
before we use.
yes.
Yeah. So,
Otherwise, you could not even find your service.
right, right.
Okay. Since this is embedded deployment, I mean, a system alias is created for the same system where we develop this is ERP, right?
Right.
And this is pointed to EH client, I mean, EH7 client 800. In fact, it is the same system. If you see, it is, I mean, system ID is EH7, client is 800. Okay, it is the same system. But let's say when I go to the RFC destination, you don't see anything, right? So if you look at the RFC destination, it is a ABAP type system, but in the technical settings, it is all empty because it just refers to the same system. Okay, so that's why normally, I mean, most of the times you create a local system alias. I mean, it just say local gateway, local app, and the RFC destination says none. Okay. Normally you use the system alias if you are using embedded deployment option. Basically, I mean, the system alias point to no RFC destination because everything happens in the same system. I mean, I'm explaining all this because whenever you go to client side, probably you might have central hub deployment. So from your hub system, you are going to find the services which you create in the business backend system. How do you create? How do you identify it? By system alias, and the system alias is pointed to an RFC destination between your hub system and your business backend system. Okay.
Yep.
So that is the basis / configuration part of it. Okay. Since okay, I have added my service, but since there are lots of surveys, it is hard to find your service. So I mean, you go and give the service name. Okay, you chose your service name. In the bottom part of it, you will see on the right hand side, you will see the system alias. Basically, if you are in the hub system, this system alias will tell you where the service is developed or from where the service is getting data from. Okay, let's say in the hub system, probably somebody asked a question earlier. Okay, so this is it. I mean, let's say if you have the same service name from two different systems, let's say if you choose a service, how do you know to which system it is getting data from? Based on the system alias, and the system alias points to RFC destination, and that RFC destination is a trusted one, right? Okay, so you will know from which system you are going to get the data from. Okay, and on the left hand side in the bottom part you will have call browser and gateway client. Okay, gateway client is a tool where you can test your service. I mean, all the operation you can test it. Okay, so I will go to the gateway client. So uh, this is the transaction name. Okay, you can go from activate and maintain. You can go from this transaction, or you can directly go to, I mean, if you know the service name and all, you can directly go to this transaction. Okay. Even though we are following embedded deployment option, I'm going to give you all the details so that, I mean, even if the architecture is, most probably the architecture will be different at your client side, so that you know where to test your service, which transaction exists in what place. Okay, that is very important. Okay, so this is the gateway client, and you will see here HTTP method. Okay, so basically in the gateway client you can test all the scenarios. You can test the scenarios to get, you can test the scenarios for post, put, delete, and this is the URI. I mean, if you remember what we have discussed in the RESTful API constraints and the basic tenets, I mean, if you follow what we have done today, you will see it. I mean, we have created a resource called bank, and we have created a collection of resources called banks. Okay, and we are going to identify each individual resource by its, I mean, unique name. Okay, and we are going to identify through unique resource identifiers or URL. Okay, and we are going to use HTTP methods to do the CRUD operations. Okay, so this is what it is. Let's just go ahead and execute it. This is just service information. Okay, I mean, you will see all the entities and all the entity sets that you have created, and you have a URL too, right? You have a URL too. Let's say if you add a URI option, metadata. Okay, I can add a, let's say I don't know anything about this service, so I will see the metadata first. Okay, if you see the metadata, you will see the um, service name, you will see the entity type, and you will see what is the key of it, what is the key, what is the entity key of this entity type, and what are all the properties, what is the type of it. I mean, here you will see only entity data model types. You will see whether it can be nullable, and you will see what is the maximum length of it. You will see all those things. Okay, here I will see the entity set name is banks, and you will see all that stuff. Let's say you have a URL too. Basically, when we talk about it, the real power of OData services is not inside SAP. Let's say if I go outside of SAP, okay, so it asks me the username and password. So you don't need to know anything about SAP, as long as I mean, you give this metadata to somebody, they will understand. Okay, if they are familiar with a RESTful API, they will see, okay, what resources or what entities I do have as part of this service. Okay, I do have bank entity, and what is the key for this bank entity, bank key, what are all the properties and what are all the data types, and I mean, so you will see everything here. Okay, um, I mean, you might have done function modules, you might have done class methods, you might have done bodies, everything, right? So what is the difference between OData services, and what is the difference between these function modules and class methods? I mean, even when you write a function module, you can get all the bank's information, you can get a bank information, you can create, you can delete, you can update, all that stuff. So what is different in OData? Can anybody answer?
Basically, it exposes to the outside SAP.
Okay, that is one.
So BAPI RFC is basically SAP internal interfacing technology. I mean, which can be accessed outside SAP as well. But the main difference OData test services is it it supports in different format, different representations like JSON, XML, and it can be exposed to the outside world.
Yeah, I mean, even earlier there are ways to expose BAPI as a web service so that it can be used by outside world, but it has never been easy. Okay, I mean, it is very clunky. I mean, to get data outside of SAP. I mean, after OData services, you don't need to stick to one user interface technology. There are tons of frameworks. There are tons of mobile platforms which understands like RESTful APIs, which understands OData format. Once you bring, SAP data outside of SAP, there will be lots of frameworks which will add advantage. Okay, so I mean, the client don't need to stick to one user interface technology. Let's say today we are talking about SAP UI5 or Fiori. In future, let's say if there is some superior or good UI framework technology which can understand SAP, which can understand OData RESTful services, they can just get done the user interface technology in that. Okay. There are little bit differences. When you talk about class methods, function modules versus OData services, in terms of statelessness and all. But this brings lot of flexibility to the customers to do their UI in whichever way they like, as long as those user interface frameworks understands RESTful APIs or OData. Okay. Okay, everybody good?
Yeah.
So we will see how to implement the corresponding methods that we talked about today, probably tomorrow. I think that is it for today. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask before we conclude this today.
Sudhir, the URL that you copied and pasted in Chrome and we checked the metadata, where did you get that URL from?
Okay. If you see it right, so there are several parts to it. This is the protocol, this is the host name, and this is the port number. Okay, and if you go to SICF, we talked about it, right? If you go to SICF, the service is a SICF node is created.
Right. Yeah, that I understood. No, I just wanted to know where you got the ECID.
Okay, yeah, it does not matter. Let's say if you have any service in the system, this is how you figure it out. Okay. So the default host, this is the default host, right?
Right.
So this is the host. This is your host information.
Okay.
Okay. After that, under SAP, OPU, OData, SAP, OPU, OData, SAP, and that after that your service name. Okay.
Yeah.
This is how you figure it out.
Yeah, the default host URL, where did you get? Can you just show me that?
You will have
at the test mode gateway client. Just now we saw it.
you will have the host name. What is that?
Gateway client, we are trying to test all the methods, right? CRUD operations.
Yeah, you will get it there, but I mean, even the host name and port number will be, I mean, the host name and port number of this system. It will be maintained somewhere, I guess. SMTPER.
It will be there in system menu properties.
Where is it?
Status. Go to status.
Yeah, server name is this one.
Right side, the host. Bottom right side,
Yeah.
under database data.
Yeah, this is the server name, right?
No.
Yeah,
No, that host.
ECC.
Yeah.
Okay. ECCADS.domain.com. Yeah, I mean, it is just the host name to get to the system, host name and the port number on which you can, I think it will be maintained somewhere. I'm not sure where it is maintained, but you can see all of it. And you will get this information even from the gateway client too, okay, when you
Yeah, this is where we copied from gateway
yeah,
client.
you will see the information of it from here too, okay.
Okay, in the gateway client, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
so let's go ahead and I mean, call my this is how, let's say, if you want to get entity set, if you want to request entity set, you are just going to enter the entity set name, okay. Okay, so it just says that, I mean, method banks underscore get entity set not implemented in data provider class, okay. Where does it go? Let's say, so first it will come to here, it will come to the data provider class extension and it will call this method, okay, get entity set. Since it is not implemented here, it goes to data provider class. And when it goes to data provider class, it is simply raising an exception saying that this banks underscore get entity set is not implemented, okay. Let's say if you want to implement it, right, you are going to implement in the data provider class extension. So I'm not going to write any code here, but just, okay. So I'm going to add a system breakpoint. So let's say if I execute it, so it will come here, okay. Since I don't implement, it just don't give you any data, okay. So basically if you don't implement that method, it goes to the data provider class, and in the data provider class you are simply raising an exception saying that that method is not implemented in the data provider class. So I mean, you are going to implement whatever the methods required for your user interface application inside data provider class extension, okay. You're good.
Yes.
Any questions?
I have one question. So when you create entity type in NetWeaver Gateway modeler,
Mm-hmm.
so there is a default checkbox, right, as entity type. So what is the difference if we don't select that checkbox?
Okay. I'm not sure. I can check and let you know.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah, that checkbox.
Okay. It is, I mean, there is a, when you create an entity type, you got to have a key. When you create a complex type, right, it should not have a key. Okay. You can create complex types without any key. Okay. We will see what
Okay.
the
So
complex
yeah.
types are used for.
Okay. And when
Basically,
you
yeah.
yeah, and there are different ways of creating the entity types, right? One is
Uh-huh.
from a web structure, and what are the other options?
You can just create entity type and you can just go ahead and add these.
Okay, so the properties we can manually create here.
Yeah, you can manually create it here.
Yeah, when they showed us in our office, I mean, they created the entity data model directly from RFC function module.
Yeah, you can do it too. I mean, there are several options, but as I told you earlier, most of the times either your function modules are going to be I mean, too big or too small for the entity types that you are going to create. Only, I mean, people from, I mean, core ABAP background are going to do it. Um, I mean, most of the times you don't find function modules for the needs. Either the function module will be, I mean, too small or too big for your needs. Okay. This way, I mean, let's say if there is a function module, you can use it inside your data provider class extension methods. Okay. I mean, it's up to you, but I suggest that, I mean, you create a structure for your entities so that, I mean,
Hmm.
all those structures will become handy when you are going to write code inside the data provider class extensions. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, whenever you create an entity, there will be class methods created, which are equivalent to all the HTTP spec methods. So, technically, you could just go to that class method and write whatever the logic you need. You don't need to create a function module for that need, and you are going to use that function module inside that class method until or unless you know for sure that you are going to use this function module at some other place. Okay.